What's up, everybody? It's Power Rankings Podcast, aka the Power Rankings Show. I'm your host, Elliot Harrison, and I love opening up with my face looking like I'm lost in space. I never know when that wipe is coming. But I do know who's going to be on our show today. One of the people, that's right, one of the people is at Marcus_Mosher. Hello, sir.
Elliot, how's it going?
I'm excited to be here today because we're talking about something that sometimes I suck at, let's be honest. So because I know my limitations and I can admit when I'm wrong, unlike a certain partner of mine, I like to bring in a guest that does know what he's talking about. So we're going to reveal that guest in just a second. But you had a fun fact today. I want to get our fun fact out.
Yeah. On this day in 1965, the NFL changed the color of the penalty flags from yellow to I guess it would be from white to yellow. Sorry, I ruined that already. That's all right.
You already ruined it.
I want to know, why did they change the color of the flags?
That's a really good question. Probably because the referees got tired of signaling retreat and that we give up. I guess. I don't know.
I figured it out. They did a study that yellow was more easy to identify because so many players were wearing white colored socks and white colored shoes, and yellow just stood out more on the field.
I'm pretty sure you said that was 65 that happened.
Yes.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that Tex Schramm was the president of the Cowboys, and the Cowboys in the 60s, Clint Murkison was their owner, but he was totally a hands-off owner, just like their owner is today. Tex Schramm, one of the most significant people in the history of the league, came up with all these innovations. But one of the innovations I'm pretty sure that he developed was having a thick white sideline. It used to be there were just lines on, the sideline was just a line, just like the yard line. And, by making the sideline these big white thick things you could see on TV, it made it a lot easier to tell when someone was out of bounds. Probably helped too that I think it was Dickie Magle was running for a touchdown in the 50s, and a guy literally came off the bench in college and tackled him. Have you ever seen that play ever from the 50s?
I have, because I remember people talking about this during the Super Bowl. It's like, hey, what if at the end of the game somebody's running for a game-winning touchdown? What's the penalty if somebody just comes off the bench and tackles him before they can see the end zone? And that play was shown a lot.
Well, those players, they used to be right up, near the line sometimes, standing around, and the benches were pretty small in a lot of the stadiums back then. Of course, now they've got heaters and, Gatorade, and they have hyperbaric chambers on the sideline and exercise bikes.
Wait for a porta potty on the sideline, though.
Yeah, I mean, dude, if you've got to,
you gotta go, man. You gotta go.
You gotta go. Yeah, but with that being said, we've got to go to our guest. Terrible
what a transition.
What a transition. But look, it's draft season, and one of my good buddies has been one of the most respected voices, both online. He's guests on shows like this one, and he's been at it for a really long time. He works for NFL.com, but he's been studying the draft, I think, before he was ever employed at NFL.com. He's just one of those guys. It's Chad Reuter, everybody, from the NFL Network and NFL.com. What's up, home sliced cheese?
I'm thrilled to be here, my man, even though that intro, that segue, I'm not sure if that's tied to me. Hopefully not. But anyway, no, it's great to be here. I love seeing you guys, and it's wonderful for it to be draft season.
Hey, when you've got to go to Chad Reuter. That's what I always say.
That's right.
Sorry.
The Reuter, and that's been associated with my name for as long as I've been alive. So nothing new. I think
the one we use here is Speed Reuter. They do an okay job. My speed, by the way, my Speed Reuter story of the day, 10 seconds. One time they cleaned out all my pipes and everything. They had this giant bucket of dirty sewage water, and he carries it out my place, and he gets all the way to the front door, and then he trips and hits the bucket, and it splashes all over my wall. It was terrible. That's my Speed Reuter story. So I think what we're going to get to is a lot better than that. So I asked Marcus.
Sounds good.
And Chad to kind of come up with what I would call lightning rod draft choices. And I was talking to Marcus on the phone the other night. We actually did some pre-podcast homework. I know that's shocking.
We worked, but 15 actual minutes of work the other day.
That's right. I wanted to know, I was like, Marcus, if there's like, are there 8 guys? Because our rundown has 8, so it's an easy number to do. Are there 8 guys that like are just controversial as to where they're going to be drafted or what position they're going to play or something else that makes them a little bit harder for guys like Chad who do mock drafts for NFL.com and do this professionally to do their job? Because, man, you don't know what team they're going to. You don't know where they're going to go. There's all these questions. So I asked Marcus to come up with 4, and Chad came up with 4. And we're going to get into that. Anything you guys want to add about players like this or give an example from past drafts of a guy that might be like the guys you're talking about today? Just one guy that was a lightning rod?
Well, to me, when you said that, it basically means a wide variance of draft position of guys that could go, that a lot of people are projecting late first round, but end up going in the third. Well, example from last year, Bernard Raymond, the tackle from Central Michigan. A lot of people are putting him in the first round. I valued him as a third round guy. So in my mock draft, I'm like, okay, maybe the Colts need a left tackle so bad that they're going to be willing to take this guy early in the second round. Well, he went in the third round like he should have. So that's kind of the guy we're talking about here that is seen going in a lot of different places. And for one reason or another, because he's got great physical traits, but maybe his film isn't quite there, or the opposite. So that's what I thought of when we talk about guys that are lightning rods in terms of, they could really go in a wide variance of range.
And for me, Chad, it was the outliers, right? Like this class is full of outliers. And I picked a couple of guys where you might love their tape, but there's something in their, measurables that might scare you away. We'll get to those guys in a second.
Yeah, I would just say for me, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but just a guy that I thought I was talking to Marcus earlier was actually Jadeveon Clowney. Even though he went first overall, there were a lot of questions about his productivity wasn't the same as a senior. He was such an athlete. He had a knee problem. And some people are like, yeah, he's easily the best prospect in the draft. And other people seem like stay away, And so that's an interesting one to me. But let's get started here. I believe we're going with you first, right, Chad?
That's right. I've got Jalin Hyatt, receiver out of Tennessee, who, look, he's got speed. He's made some big plays. I mean, the Volunteers offense, I'm going to say it ran through him, but he was a major part of the success they had, certainly before Hendon Hooker got injured this year. And his ability to stretch the field and make some plays after the catch, getting those quick screens, a lot of teams have them on the radar probably in the first round. But there are some questions. I mean, I've heard him compared to Chris Olave, which I think is really reaching. But I think in the right offense, he's going to be able to, like the Chiefs, is just a great feat for a team like the Chiefs that really need that downfield threat, a guy you can start in the slot and push him outside. And the slot fade is so big right now. But again, other questions like, was the Tennessee's offense the reason that he was so successful? He ran in the mid 4.4s, which is fine, but he's under 180 pounds. So is that too slight? So there's all kinds of questions about him, but I think he can become a big playmaker.
My question for you, Chad, is I think he's more of a downfield vertical threat that I worry about some of the other parts of his game, but how valuable is that guy even in today's NFL? Because it seems like to me, the NFL is transitioning more to the guys that can win quickly underneath, and you get them the ball and they make plays after the catch. I'm just not sure that's Hyatt's game.
Yeah, he did that quite a bit. He got some quick screens at Tennessee, but in that offense, it was so vertical. Josh Heupel's offense is so vertical that they didn't throw quite as many of those screens as you see in a lot of other offenses. Now, will he be able to avoid defenders in the NFL as easily as he did in college? That's a question. Because he is more of a strider. He's not one of these 5'10" quick receivers, two-way receivers that you see in the slot a lot. But I think he's got enough of that quickness as well as the striding speed that I think somebody will take him in the first round. That's my feeling. But the opinions are all over the board on him, and that's why I included him on this list. Would it be shocking to me if he fell in the mid-second round? No, absolutely not, because I think some people have that opinion of him. So it'll be really interesting to see. He's going to be a really specific fit for a team, but I think he's got a little more after the catch ability than people think. But he's not elite in that category, like a Zay Flowers or somebody like that. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits with certain teams.
You mentioned Tennessee, big play, vertical player. I'm going to go way back here on you guys. Alvin Harper came out of Tennessee. Mm-hmm. He was a great high jumper. And back then, you had a lot of 5'10" guys that could fly in the NFL. The Oilers ran a run and shoot with a bunch of Smurfs. And Dallas was one of the first teams to go get a big guy like Alvin Harper, who I think Alvin Harper was 6'3", well over 200 pounds, and could jump out of the stadium. But a lot of teams didn't have players like that. So I don't think every team was looking to get Alvin Harper high. The Cowboys did. They had him for 4 years, and he was a big play guy, but he never turned into that number one, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdown kind of guy. He was always a compliment player. So just a guy I thought of. A little different, though. This guy's a 5'10" flyer a little bit. Alvin Harper was a big dude that could jump. Let's go to yours, Marcus.
Yeah, and Elliot, I actually want to ask you about this next player because I think you have a good idea in this one. It's Brian Branch, a safety from Alabama, who played a little bit of slot corner, there with the Crimson Tide. But my question is, he's a 190-pound safety. And if you know anything about the history of the position at safeties, most teams just cross off safeties that are sub 200 pounds because that's basically cornerback size. And he ran a 4.58 40, which it's not slow for a safety, but certainly not fast either. How high do you draft a safety who has awesome tape that doesn't run fast and isn't big, especially with the way the safety market is now in the NFL?
Yeah, I don't know how you take a guy like this in the first round. Now, I'm a big believer in tape. To me, this sounds like a third round, a guy that would hang that low, but I don't know exactly how he compares to the other safeties. I mean, if his tape is a lot better, I mean, I'll give you an example. Honey Badger played a lot of slot corner for the Cardinals. I mean, he was a safety, but Honey Badger was faster than a 4.58. Definitely. So you have a guy like that. Now, I can tell you that it used to be that ball skills were highly, highly valued in the NFL. Okay, you and I have talked about Everson Walls, your dad's favorite player before. Mm-hmm. Everson Walls ran a 4.7. Mm-hmm. In 1981, 4.7 was slow, guys, for a corner. Okay, it wasn't that much difference. Okay, there were plenty of corners in the NFL who could run 4.4s and 4.5s. The thing with Everson Walls, though, is he had incredible ball skills. But with teams playing less man coverage than ever before, back in the 80s, you played a lot of man, so ball skills were at a premium. When you're playing zone, you're hoping for tip balls. You're hoping for balls that go off the receiver's hand. So I don't know, Marcus, that you could draft this guy that high. That would be my answer.
Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he's probably an early second round pick, early to mid second round. That's my guess as of now because of the average athleticism. But the thing is, it was clear all season, and actually the last 2 years, definitely last year, that he was the best player on the Alabama defense. Mm-hmm. I mean, other than Will Anderson, you could just kind of set him aside, but at times he was more impactful than Anderson was, and because he wasn't facing some of the doubles and things like that. So I think he does a little bit of everything. So he's a guy that fits perfectly in this conversation, because would I be shocked if Jacksonville picked him at 24? Absolutely not. I would not, because he does a little bit of everything. But I think he's more likely to go in the early part of the second round, where you've seen guys like Landon Collins and Xavier McKinney and some of these type of guys go, early in the second round because they don't have some of the elite traits. But he does everything. I mean, I really like him as a player. I think he will be a very good player. The 190 doesn't bother me that much because he plays much bigger than that. So I'm not worried about that as much. I think he and if anything, I think he's got to be able to move to his most efficiently. So if that's the weight that he does it, great. He's a tough guy. I think he's in that second round conversation. But again, when you look at film, sometimes some of these guys get picked a little bit higher than the 40 time might indicate.
All right, Chad. So where's Isaiah Foskey going? That's the next guy on your list.
Boy, he could go any. I mean, I've seen, again, is another one of these guys that you like his production, 2 years ago. Very strong power rusher that a lot of teams like because he can, stand his ground. And when he gets an open lane to the quarterback, he can take advantage of it. He's got great length. Not the biggest in terms of weight. He's he might be sort of in between linebacker and a 4-3 end, might be in that tweener category for some teams. So some teams may not value him as much. And not maybe he's a little stiff in terms of he's not the bendiest defensive end ever. But again, he's got power, he's got length, and I think some teams will value that more than others. So I think he could end up being a top 50 pick, but he could also fall into the early third round. Some of these guys fall into that area of the draft because they're not quite bendy, they're not quite this or that. So I think he's got a wide variance of places where he could go.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's going to end up in the second round just because you don't find guys very often that are 6'5", 265 and running the 4.5s. In fact, he reminds me a lot of a guy that we saw last year going in the second round, Sam Williams, who was drafted by the Cowboys, who had very similar numbers. So I agree with you. I think the talk of him going in the first round is too much, but second round is usually when you gamble on traits, and I think his traits are off the charts.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I would say he's Sam Williams is a good example, but I think he's one of these guys, and this happens every year where a lot of people think these pass rushers are going to go earlier, but he could go early third real easy, I think, and people maybe don't understand that. And like Tim Williams from Alabama is a great example, went third round. And one or two of these edge rushers will probably go late, and he's a candidate for that. But the Rams and some of the other teams picking in the top 50 of that early second round, they need edges so bad that he may end up going there.
Marcus, is KANCEY a tweener like FOSKEY is your number 5?
I mean, maybe. Listen, if you haven't studied the draft at all, I'm going to just tell you the profile. You tell me the first name that you think of. Defensive tackle from Pittsburgh, 6 foot, 281 pounds, ran a 4.67 40-yard dash, and had 34.5 tackles for a loss in his career. Does that remind you, Elliot? Who does it remind you of?
Karen Faunold.
There you go. It's
rhymes with that. Yeah.
Right. It's just, at what point is it too small to be a defensive tackle? Because even Aaron Donald was heavier, had longer arms, and was a little bit taller than KALIJAH KANCEY, but the production is off the charts. Can you bet on him being an outlier like Aaron Donald inside the top 15, 20 picks? I don't know.
Yeah, he's a tough one because, look, I've been watching him the last couple of years, and every time I turn him on, I say, he's not Aaron Donald. He's not Aaron Donald. He's not Aaron Donald. You just keep repeating that to yourself, but then he just keeps making plays. He keeps making plays. You think you can just shove him aside in the run game, but he plays with leverage because he's got that low center of gravity. I don't want him facing double teams all the time, but I think he's a guy that plays a little stronger than you'd get. So, yeah, I agree. He's a guy. Is he a top 20? I think he's going to be a top 20 pick. I think later in the top 20, like Detroit, maybe somebody moves into that late part of the first, in that top 20 to get him. The Jets at 13 are actually an interesting place for him too, because Sheldon Richardson, very similar. Jonathan Allen is actually a really good comp for him, and he went 17, I think, to Washington. So right in that area of the draft, I think somebody's going to get a really good player. If you line him up in a gap and let him shoot, great. So, but yeah, it's not going to be for every team at 280 pounds.
I just say this: if you can knife through, if you can play 30 to 40 good quality snaps, and if you know leverage and you know how to use your body, you bet you can play at a high level in the NFL. Aaron Donald is not big, and if we want to go back, I reached into Alvin Harper. Well, Mark Stepnoski was a great center, and he played at like 260 something because he knew leverage. Well, and so, yeah, you could play
John Randall. John Randall.
Perfect
Yes. Example.
Yep. Yes. Perfect guy. I wanted to go on both sides of the line there just to show that you can play on the line, but you've got to know leverage. Interesting name on the list is number 4. This is one of yours, Chad.
Yeah, so I can't read it, but that's
MAZI
okay.
Smith.
MAZI Smith. So MAZI Smith is well, my setup is not wonderful. But anyway, so
he's using a BlackBerry, everybody, to do the podcast.
So okay. So no, Marcus, I know you'll know this, and I'm pretty sure what this is. Over 3 years with Michigan, MAZI has 6 tackles for loss and a half a sack. I believe those are the numbers. Okay. So that lack of production makes it really difficult for him to project as a first round guy, because look, I'm the first one to say it's not all about statistics, right? I mean, it's just not, depending on what you're asked to do in that defense, et cetera. But if you're not getting at least a couple of sacks a year when a quarterback is holding onto the ball too long, that's really tough. It's really tough to pick a guy in the first round with that lack of production for some. Now, he's also an excellent athlete, right? Not that we've seen him do all the drills, because he hasn't done all the drills this offseason. He's done some great jumps that are really good for a guy who's 325 pounds or so. But in his film, he flashes an ability to get in the backfield. Can he stop and make the play? That's less uncertain. So I think he's a guy that's getting a lot of first round talk, but it wouldn't shock me if he ends up in that mid to late second round as a guy who you're not going to be able to get a lot of pass rush out of, but he's really strong at the point of attack. He can affect plays at times. So it'll be really, I'll be very interested to see where he ends up going.
The reason why the lack of production doesn't bother me too much is that just really wasn't his role, right? He was not. Wait
a minute. This is Marcus Mosher telling me that the production doesn't affect him. What?
His role was just different than most other of these, penetrating defensive tackles. That's just not what they asked him to do. And I will say that we did see somebody similar to this come out in the draft just a few years ago. Deron Payne for Alabama had 5 career tackles for a loss and 3 sacks in 3 seasons. And I kind of project his role as the same thing. So while it does scare me a little bit, I'm not worried about taking him like at the end of the first round, top of the second.
Guys, if it doesn't work out, he can always get a job at Penetrode. Sorry, bad office space joke. Let's go to number 3, Quentin Johnston. This is one of Marcus's.
I need your help, Chad, on this one, because this one is terrifying to me. Quentin Johnston is maybe the most gifted receiver in this class. 6'2", 210 pounds. You can put on the tape and see him making plays down the field. He's spectacular after the catch, but ran a really poor 3-cone. It was 4th percentile 3-cone. His drop rate was number 1 in the country among all qualifying receivers. He really struggled with some of the concentration stuff. I don't love the route tree that they have at TCU. Where do you draft a receiver like this?
So in my first 4-round mock, I had him going in the second round. And I got a lot of questions from people. Why don't you put him in the first round? For the reasons that you exactly say. His hands are not great. He's very limited in what he can do. I mean, he can make plays after the catch. And similar to Christian Watson coming out last year, who was an early second-round pick, but Christian Watson was a 4-3 guy, and Quentin Johnston is not that. He's a 4-5 guy.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So, I mean, 4-5-5 guy, I should say, probably.
Yeah.
And so, look, he needs time to get up to speed. Now, his body control is excellent. He can make all kinds of amazing catches on the sideline, and somebody will value that. I don't think he's a first-round guy. A lot of people project him as a first-round guy. To me, he's like a Denzel Mims coming out a couple years ago, who was a great, even better athlete than Johnson. So I agree that he's really a guy that could go anywhere from 22 to 60, just depending on how teams feel about his upside as a playmaker, rather than just being a really good number 2 guy.
When you guys start talking, I mean, I'm down with 40 time and strength and productivity, but I got to be honest with you. When you start getting into, oh man, guys, I'm really concerned about his 3-cone.
Wow. It's a little Dungeons and Dragons-y. I get it.
It is.
Yes,
I mean, you really remind me of a kid like in 1982 going, your cleric just doesn't have enough spells, bro.
Absolutely. He's got +3 armor though. But you know what? The thing is, the 3-cone is as, if not more important for a lot of these players than a 40 time, because it's really giving you short area agility. But unfortunately, part of the draft process now, Elliot, honestly, like most of the players aren't even doing it anymore, which is really disappointing because you don't get that data in. They're choosing not to do it. Look at the tape. Well, guess what? You don't see that as much on the tape as you would like. So nerdy, but it's valuable when you get it. I get it. Leaving it out kind of stinks. It would be like watching the G.I. Joe cartoon and they left out the part where they say, and knowing is half the battle. I mean, you just can't have the cartoon without that. All right. So, Chad, your last one here, Dawand Jones. Why is he on here? Because, and actually, Elliot, I forgot to mention this. I was going to include Johnston on my list, but I only want to include one receiver. So I'm in the same boat as you about this guy. Dawand Jones. So he is a huge human being. 6'8", plus 375 pounds when he's on a diet.
Jeez.
And it's super long. I mean, he's got yardsticks for arms. Okay. This guy is just a massive human, right? He's a better athlete than Orlando Brown. And that was an interesting thing for me at the combine. I wanted to see how good of an athlete this guy really is. He was a former basketball player, so he's not super heavy-footed. But the fact is, at that size, he's just not super nimble. He just isn't. But a lot of teams are okay with that and are okay with just having him being big enough. The ball comes out of the pocket quickly enough. And they say, we get the ball out of the pocket. He can start for us because he's simply too big to get around. And so he's one of these guys, again, Isaiah Wilson went late in the first round. If Orlando Brown hadn't been so bad in the combine, he might have went in the top 30 to 40 picks. But again, he went in the third round. So Jones is in that category. Like, he's stiff. He's not going to be able to adjust people in space, but he's just one of these guys that is just big enough. So where do you take a guy like that? You know, mid-second round into early fourth round. That's the variance this guy has. And so it's going to be really interesting to see. It's just going to be one team's going to be like the Kansas City Chiefs. They took Orlando Brown, put him at left tackle, and they're fine with it because, you know, Mahomes can get the ball out and run. So really interesting prospect.
I would be terrified of drafting this guy, Chad, for a ton of different reasons. But the biggest one for me is he went to the Senior Bowl at 360 pounds. And everybody said he needed to lose weight, right? Lose weight, get down to 340, be a little bit more athletic. In a month's time, from the Senior Bowl to the Combine, he gained 14 pounds.
Yeah.
How can I trust this player after I give him a bunch of money that he's going to be able to keep his weight, you know, under 360 pounds? There's just no way that I could draft this guy high and trust him at all.
I wouldn't ask him to lose weight, to be honest. I think he plays at 370. He played at 370 in Ohio State. And he was just very effective.
It's just too hard when you get to be that size. Like, if you have any kind of injury, to overcome it. Like, we've seen it with Mekhi Becton, right? Mekhi Becton got too big. Once he got hurt, he wasn't able to get back on the field at all. That's what would scare me.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I wouldn't have picked Isaiah Wilson in the first round either. But you know, that's why I think teams can't use that high of a pick. But I think it'll be interesting come late second round. Let's just say the Dallas Cowboys want a versatile tackle at their pick. Is that too soon? You guys say, yes, it's too soon, but we'll see, won't we? We'll see if them or Kansas City, you know, pick him at the end of round 2. But again, he's one of these guys that, like you said, he's so big that round 4 is possible. Darian Kennard came out last year out of Kentucky,
sixth round.
You know, fifth round, I think. Fifth round, I think. But you know, so it could be that situation. So he could really go anyway. That's why he's a perfect guy to talk about today. Just because you don't really, all it takes is one team to love him enough to take him early in the third or late in the second.
I want to take you guys back a little bit. Chad, you may have been covering the draft at this point. Marcus, I think you were, you know, drinking out of plastic cups at, like, you know, parties at this point. But the Ravens, the year they got Michael Orr, on the other side, who was obviously very famous, the blind side, so on, Sandra Bullock, yay. But on the other side, they had a guy named Jared Gaither, who was 6'8" and change, I think. And he was, and I'm putting this in quotes, 350. I don't know if this guy would be a similar comp there, but that's the guy that I thought of. And to be honest, I could not remember his name. I was like, the Ravens had a guy like this, and it wasn't Michael Orr. And I was trying to think. He was the tallest player in the league. He was huge.
6'9", yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's very similar to him. Aaron Gibson came out, you know, 20 years ago out of Wisconsin. Very similar guy. He had to shift into guard eventually. But I think, honestly, Jones is a better athlete than either of those two guys. And he's lighter on his feet. But yeah, guys like that sometimes pop up in the NFL, and they either make it or they're Jordan Mailata. Look, Jordan Mailata is not significantly different in size, and he's been great for the Eagles at left tackle. but again, he was a better athlete coming out of the rugby player and all that stuff. So his issue was just lack of experience.
Yeah,
so it's an interesting case study.
Jonathan Ogden was a huge man, 6'7", and just absolutely massive human being, but he was fantastic on his feet and extremely adept with his hands. He'd give you a little jab right in the ribs if you rushed him and then laugh about it, which just made everybody furious. All right, our number one guy, Marcus, it's your guy. Who we got?
Yeah, Jalen Carter, who I think you can make a case is the best player in this draft, and I think he's the best defensive tackle prospect that we've had maybe in the last 10 years. But
so what's the problem?
Everything else, right? I mean, we could talk about the off field stuff. He went to the pro day, did a couple reps and looked awful. He was already at a win. He was already at couldn't complete the pro day stuff. And then now he's telling teams he's not taking any interviews with teams drafting outside the top 10, which is always a little scary. So Chad, I just want to know from you, like, at what point would you feel comfortable drafting Jalen Carter?
Oh, I think if you're anywhere between 7 and 10, I think you go with him. I think he's a guy that is just too talented to let fall much further than that. Now, look, this guy was having fun with his friends, doing something stupid, racing cars, right? I've done it. Not to the extent that they're doing it, but I've done it. And somebody who was part of that conversation, a couple of people who were part of that, died. Now, I can't imagine what it feels like to be in that situation, but I'll tell you that preparing for a pro day would be very difficult. And so putting myself in his shoes in that place, I'm not going to make it hurt as much as for maybe some other people. However, teams really have to do their homework on this guy and really have to say, are you going to put in the work to be the professional that you need to be, even in times that are very difficult? And he's got to answer those questions. So, but I think once he is through that, now the legal process is over for that. So he can kind of move on as much as he can with the memory still holding. That I think a team is going to be able to say, look, at 7, 8, 9, 10, we'll give this guy a shot, and we think he could be a really special player.
I'd like to ask Marcus something here on this. If I'm a GM and I'm looking at this player and my personnel director is saying, hey, I think this is who we need to go with. This guy is an elite talent. He's a top 10 talent. He might even be top 7, whatever, which there is a difference. We all know when you're in the top, say 12 picks, there's a difference between 8 and 10. It's just different than 24 and 26. Right. So what I would say is, if we have questions about anybody's work ethic whatsoever, we're not spending a top 10 pick. It's just too doggone valuable. However, in an extenuating circumstance, and this is my question for you, Marcus, were there any questions about this player's work ethic before all of this?
No, I don't think the work ethic was an issue. I think there was some people that worried about the maturity, and there's been some reports that maybe he wasn't the most well-liked person in the locker room, but you throw on the tape and he plays hard all the time. Yeah. So I that part of it I wouldn't worry about too much. I do think if you can get him into a team that's kind of stable, that has a good coaching staff, that can kind of help him grow up a little bit, I think you'll be fine. But I mean, for example, the Texans drafted number 2. I don't know if that's the best scenario or best team for him to land on.
If they pass up Bryce Young to take him, that's their own problem. Yep. I mean, honestly, that's what
about the Raiders at 7? Like, do you really want him going with that team and out in Las Vegas? Because my answer would be no.
No, it is a tough one. It is a tough one. I think Detroit. I think Dan Campbell's got a really good situation going on there, so I think that would be a great fit for him. Seattle's fine.
Yep.
Atlanta. It's interesting with Atlanta because I think they could use him, but I'll be interested if they want him that close to home or not.
I agree.
So that's tough, but they may do it anyway because he's so talented.
The dream landing spot would be Philadelphia, right at number 10. You pair him with with Jordan Davis, who you drafted last year. They've already got a great defensive line. Like, they can help him grow up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think with Philadelphia though, my guess is that if he's still on the board at that time, they're going to be fielding calls from like the Jets, and they're going to trade out. That would be my guess, and he would go somewhere like the Jets, which you would think New York isn't that great for him, but honestly, getting him away from home might be the best thing, regardless of where it is. So,
and I think Robert Saleh would help him there. I think that actually is a good fit, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah, so I think there are places for him that he could succeed. But yeah, I mean, in terms of talent, he is the best since Ndamukong Suh, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at. And of course, Aaron Donald's in the conversation, but he went 13th, so people didn't expect him to be what he is. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a special talent that has a chance. One guy that's interesting, you guys may remember, is Nick Fairley out of Auburn, and he was explosive in that final year at Auburn, right? And he went 13th. So I'll be interested to see how much this character stuff and all these other things to affect. Now, Fairley was pretty lean for his side. He wasn't the strongest guy, so it's not. I'm not making like a comp here, but that's the one. If this was to happen, we've seen something similar happen in the past, where a guy everybody thought was, really top 5 guy went down. And the other thing is the quarterbacks going early. That might shift things down a little bit, where some of these guys might go a little bit later than what we thought.
We had a defensive tackle go 13th last year to Philadelphia, so I don't know if you had him ranked higher.
Jordan,
yeah,
I would definitely rate him higher than Jordan Davis. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Just 2 quick thoughts bouncing off of you guys. One, it's interesting hearing you guys talk about, historically speaking, about you don't want to take a player too close to home. Maybe they're going to get in trouble or whatever. It used to be a team like Atlanta that was trying to drum up interest would want to maybe take a guy that went to Georgia because you didn't have so much coverage of the game. And so people knew their regional teams, but they didn't know who Purdue's defensive tackle was. I'm just picking a random college, but did they know Georgia and Auburn? You bet, so there's that. But I think overall, guys, when I hear y'all talk, just like if I'm the voice of a fan here or a wannabe GM, it's one thing to me to overlook someone's measurables because the tape is really good. I'm on that side of the fence. Okay. Mm-hmm. But when you have issues of maturity or work ethic or something like that, I find that harder to overlook because the tape is good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but here's the thing with that. We've seen teams, very successful teams, take chances on those guys and win big time.
Sure.
Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs are the best at this, that there might be, whether it's immeasurable or not immeasurable, they pick guys a little bit later than you think, and you're like, how is he still available? And teams, and this is where I just was talking with somebody about this. There can be too much information. Teams can have too much information at their hands, and they get away from who's really good football players and who fits our system. And the Chiefs are a good example. The Ravens are a good example. The Steelers have done it forever. The Seahawks can get away with it at times, like DK Metcalf and then other times they do it with Malik McDowell and it falls flat on their face. So it's definitely a risk-reward situation. But, I think we've seen it that it's just a matter of how high you pick the guy. And sometimes these playoff teams get these really good players because the teams that aren't as successful pass on them because of things like this.
Or your organizational culture. If you feel like you can really bring that player in and foster an environment. Sometimes players drop into, teams' laps. Like the Cleveland Browns got a really quality wide receiver last year because the Cowboys didn't want to pay him. Sorry, I was just picking at Marcus.
Fine.
Speaking of picking, Marcus, why don't you pick us a football card? Why don't we let Chad in on our dumb football card nerddom?
We're going 1995 Fleer Ultra set. Okay.
All right.
Okay, so it's got to be a Jaguar.
You got to be joking me. This is so funny, Elliot. You ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready. Wait a minute. That's not who I think it is. Is that Darnay Scott?
It is Darnay Scott.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Do you remember Darnay Scott, Chad?
Yeah, great receiver, returner, did a little bit of everything. Yeah, really, really fine player.
Don't worry, I don't expect his draft profile. Okay, so Darnay Scott, I'm going to guess the numbers for 94. Can I guess here? That's a cool background.
Yeah,
actually. I like the old, he's wearing the old Bengals gear because in 94, a lot of teams did their throwback. It was a 75th anniversary. I'm going to go 42 catches for 725 yards and 5 touchdowns.
So you're really close. That's actually a fantastic guess. 46 catches for 866 yards and 5 touchdowns. So you nailed the touchdowns.
He had a monster game against the Cowboys that year. Dallas was 2-time defending champs. They go into Cincinnati, the worst team in the league. Okay. The worst team in the league. And Cincinnati took them to overtime with this guy making, I believe, his first start, a guy named Jeff Blake at quarterback.
I was going to say that was Jeff Blake era. Yeah.
Yeah. It was Jeff Blake debut, I'm pretty sure. And, but interestingly enough, one of the big Dallas touchdowns, Alvin Harper out jumping 2 defenders at the goal line to bring this full circle, all vertical, that guy. Anyway, that's always cool. Chad, I love it when you come on. Go ahead.
I'm so happy that the Cowboys aren't any good anymore. It just makes me so happy. Chad. And then to talk to you guys about it, just the memories of the Packers losing to the Cowboys in the mid-90s all the time just made me so sad. Now it just made me happy thinking about how that's been like 25 years ago already. That's so great.
It's not my fault. I mean, Darnay Scott and Jeff Blake, literally, that was their arrival game against the Cowboys. And it was a big deal at the time because they darn near knocked them off, you know? So I tried to.
Thank you guys for having me on. I'm sorry. I just had to get that in. But
he's peacing out, Marcus. He's like, I don't want to hear your
Chad's
crap.
First and last appearance on the Power Ranking Show.
Yeah, exactly. No, dude, seriously, man. We love having you on. By the way, you can follow Chad. It's at Chad _Reuter, REUTER. You're one of those underscore guys. It always makes it difficult for me. I had to look it up and make sure I had it right. He writes for NFL.com. Can you go to NFL.com/Reuter? Does that pull up your Reuter archive?
It might be
I did there?
/author/Chad Reuter or something like that.
That's too complicated.
I can't remember.
Just
I don't look up my
Chad
own articles very much. Just like
Google
Chad Reuter draft, you'll find all this stuff, like people yelling at me, and then people.
I get it, man.
The articles. It's pretty easy.
I never wanted to read my own slop. Oh, we're getting the music. We're getting the hook. Marcus is at Marcus_Mosher. He covers the Cowboys, locked up the Cowboys with Landon McCool. He also covers the Raiders on USA Today, Raider Wire. He writes for PFF.com. I am at Harrison NFL. We thank Chad. We thank Marcus as usual, and the good people of Brinks.
Thank you guys.
We will talk to you guys later. Take care, everybody.